all good. Okay, so look, if Biden wins, first, I think what we'll get out of the media class and out of the establishment class is basically, you see the 4 evil years, the 4 cancerous, vile, disgusting years were now purged. We've now purged them, and now we can return to some level of normalcy. Now the good guys will be in charge again. Now we will be America again, and we'll have removed that cancer and all of that. And I think you'll really see that messaging. And then I think what you'll also see is what I've been warning about for the last couple of weeks, where we've seen these tweets from people like Robert Reich, who is in the Robert Reich, I suppose, at some level, who was in the Clinton administration, talking about these truth and reconciliation committees, and we're going to need lists of people. Like, I don't put it past any of the establishment people to just really start coming up with lists and names and try to just destroy people and destroy anyone associated with Trump and everything else, which in many ways would be the most anti-American thing you could do. And what I'm saying is, if Trump actually stepped away, said, I lost this thing, Biden comes in, and then you still are going after them, you're going after all the people. Remember, for all the cries of lock her up and everything else, Trump never did it. He never did it. And we have to allow for governments to have their run and then step away, and we can't be just chasing everybody. And by the way, once you break that seal and you start going after the people before you, well, then of course what you've welcomed is that someone will come for you as well. All right, but if Biden wins, I think first that will be the main messaging. America is somehow back. The world likes us again. We like ourselves again. And then I think what you'll also see is that coronavirus will slightly start disappearing. Now I think you can argue this one either way, because on one hand, Biden was really ramping up the fear around it and talking about, a national lockdown and everything else. But my personal suspicion about corona is that once the system gets what it wants, if it gets what it wants in a Biden win, I think suddenly we're going to start seeing that things start opening up again and that states will start opening up again and everything else. And I don't think it was a grand conspiracy to say that the lockdowns, especially in the blue states, had something to do with trying to take out Trump as much as possible. So I think you can argue it either way. On one hand, they've really ramped up the fear and people seem to like the lockdowns. They like being controlled. And on the other hand, it's like, but they accomplished their goal. We got Biden. So now let's return. I think one of the other things that I'm really worried about if Biden wins is that big tech will now have nothing to fear. So you can even see with this election, and last week they had those silly Senate hearings with big tech, and it was like, all right, it's just theater. I like you, Ted Cruz, but it's just theater because you're not going to do anything before the election. And then what happened? Well, we're seeing tweets taken down left and right. I woke up this morning, I had like 6 emails from Twitter about warnings about my tweets, and that people were reporting them. You only get the report emailed to you if like a high level person reports it, because otherwise every single one of my tweets is reported by a bunch of genderless anime avatar losers. So like they're clearly going to make the move, right? Like, and this is what when I make all my Star Wars references, one of the things I kept saying was, well, if Biden gets in, if the machine starts taking over again, and we've had this battle, 2-sided battle, but now the machine takes over, Biden, big tech, the Democrats, big tech. Well, why wouldn't you just shut down half of the people? You shut down the droid army. That's the analogy that I've been using here. And in essence, I think that big tech at that point would just begin the purge. Like, why wouldn't they? Why would you allow for all of these bad people who mainstream will call Hitler and racists and accomplices and all of these things? So I think big tech will be emboldened to do bad stuff. But there are some reasons that maybe things could be somewhat okay, which is that the Republicans actually did pretty decently down ticket, assuming they keep the Senate. Well, then, whatever this machine is, I don't think Biden's in charge of it. The Biden, Harris, Clinton, Obama, bleh, whatever this thing is, it's going to have, some bulwark against it, which is a Republican Senate. But, I don't know, can the Republicans actually stand up to anything without Trump, or are they just like a bunch of impotent losers? I don't know. And again, this is why I never considered myself a Republican in all of this, right? Like, I absolutely supported Trump, especially in the last couple of weeks, because I thought he was the best vehicle to just keep breaking this thing so we could try to rebuild something good. But I never have once said that I'm a Republican, because these guys are pretty unimpressive as a group of people. Do they have the better ideas, in my view, than the Democrats at this point? Well, of course they do. But that doesn't mean they do anything, really. So I think we'll have an emboldened big tech. We'll have, hopefully some level of Republican resistance. And then I think what that then leads to is some interesting things. You know what? I'm going to move, Michael. I'm going to move our third story up to now, actually, because there were some demographic things, and then I'll get to what happens if Trump wins in just a sec. But there were some demographic things that were super interesting in the midst of all this. So the LGBTQ vote. It's a lot of letters. I could have thrown an I in there. It's unclear to me how the Q is different than the other letters, but that LGBTQ vote in 2016 for Trump, it was 13%, and it more than doubled to 28%. So Trump did pretty well with the gays. You know, this guy that they said hated the gays, even though when I met him that day, he was thrilled that we were there and said he couldn't care less. So he more than doubled with the gays. Black men went from 14% to 20%. That's pretty significant, right? And black women actually doubled from 4 to 8. So of course the 20% and the 8%, it's not that those are huge numbers, but it does show you that the traditional, oh, you cannot vote for a Republican if you're this, that thing may be breaking right now. And no matter what happens to Trump after this, I think you'd have to credit him for that, right? Well, you don't have to do anything, right? And they'll always figure out a way around it. But like, I think that might be his greatest legacy, especially if come 2022, if we have 2 years of Democratic rule and Biden brings back critical race theory and they bring back Title IX and the riots continue because the anarchists and the riot people, whatever they are, they don't like Biden, they don't like the Democrats, but he'll just do nothing about it. And the states will do nothing about it. So I think there are promising signs in that regard. As I said before, even the Muslim vote was very high for Trump, relative to years past. So there's good signs here. Okay, so that's if Biden wins. If Biden wins, I think basically the forces, at least that I have been fighting against, I think they get emboldened. But I think there are some ways that they don't go completely bananas, and perhaps, and I would love for this to happen, perhaps those last sliver of good liberals actually feel kind of emboldened with Biden, and then they actually do push back on the woke nonsense. I don't see that there's any evidence that can happen, and the wokeism just destroys everything. So will Harvard suddenly become a little better now? Will the New York Times suddenly become a little bit better? Will any of these people who run around calling everybody racist become a little bit better? I don't think so, but I suppose there is a chance, and I'm trying to give you guys a little silver lining today. You know what? I want to pull up this tweet by, before we get to Trump, I want to pull up this tweet by Megyn Kelly. And I will be interviewing Megyn Kelly later today just to sort of break down the media take on this whole thing. Because as I always tell you guys, I think the media take on it and the level at which we get information is sort of more important at some level than the level of what actually is happening. It's only happening if we can if we can only actually get the information. So Megyn, let's throw this tweet up. She had an interesting tweet. She said, Pelosi says Biden has a huge mandate. Really? Dems losing seats when supposed to gain them in her chamber. DN gain control of Senate. Saw DT, Donald Trump, win more votes than ever with minority groups and did not see the promised blue wave. Truth will prevail in January when gridlock settles in. So the reason I thought that was interesting was because Pelosi's already saying this is a huge mandate. And it's like, well, the facts are that it's not really a huge mandate, no matter what happens. It's not a huge mandate. But let's also admit, right, Nancy, could you admit that you guys never gave Trump a mandate for even one day, right? You ran with Russia collusion hoax the entire time, which is so funny. The same people who ran with a Russian collusion hoax that led to a fake impeachment, a faux impeachment, they're the ones that saying right now, no, there could be nothing wrong with our election system right now. The Russians somehow hacked it last time and Trump had something to do with it, right? And we're going to run on that for years and undermine all of the systems. But right now it's going our way. So the system is perfect. I'm seeing a ton of hypocrisy on that one. The same people, the system's evil, it's corrupt, it's broken, it's Russian influence. Now, because they're getting the results they want, dude, best system ever. It's just incredible, amazing, absolutely staggering.